if you want specifics, I mean, I was living in Brampton at the time, so Patrick Brown, absolutely. Doug Ford, I mean, you name it. All of them, I accused them all of fraud. They committed a hoax. They terrorized people. They absolutely terrorized. And people died in horrific ways. Elderly people, sick people in hospitals that couldn't have visitors. You know what it was like. I'm sure you remember the horrors that people went through. And it was literally over nothing. Literally over nothing. It was all fraud. None of them did their... It's either intentional and they're complete psychopaths, but I don't obviously believe that all of them are psychopaths. I suspect a lot of them are. A lot of them are just cowards. A lot of them are just morons and idiots, and they just go along with what they're told. I started emailing Patrick Brown in 2020. I still have the emails saying, Patrick, people are saying that the alleged virus wasn't even isolated. You can find all kinds of studies saying that it was, but when you read the methods, and that's what I talk about in here, you have to actually read the methods. What did they actually do? And then you see they didn't do any such thing. So I started telling him, and the PCR tests are a hoax. I mean, I don't know how much you know about PCR tests, but I can easily explain to you that they don't detect a virus, and it's even admitted by the CDC. You can't confirm that there's, they might say that you can confirm a virus, but it's easy to see that that's not the case. But they even admit that it's not necessarily the causal agent.
Okay, so I'm not a politician nor am I a health expert, but I'm just going to say the actions that were taken by our politicians was in response to the information they were receiving from, all these labs.
Well, my position...
So how does that constitute a fraud?
Well, like I said, fraud or constructive fraud. But my position is any man or woman who takes actions is responsible for their actions. So if they failed to fact check, they just went off of the rumors that they're hearing from the WHO or their medical officer, that's on them. They failed to make sure that it was true. And it's funny because they like to condescendingly snicker at people who learn things on the internet. Meanwhile, they're just going off of rumors. And we've contacted the World Health Organization as well. But nobody has a shred of scientific, nothing remotely logical. And I would like to read to you, and this is all on my website. And when I say we have 225 institutions on record, that's just asking them about the isolation piece. We have multiple responses from many institutions. The CDC have 8 responses over different time periods. They have nothing. I also asked them about different angles of things about the spike protein information they should have. They have nothing. I've asked for studies showing contagion, scientifically demonstrating contagion of a respiratory illness, any illness that's supposedly caused for an influenza virus or coronavirus. They have nothing. There's literally nothing there. And then, I don't want to jump ahead too much yet. We've asked about, because science is, like I said, you have to do valid, rigorous, controlled experiments to, even if you had the particle, which they don't even have, to see, does it actually cause illness? Does it do the things that they say? Does it invade, hijack cells and take over and replicate? And so we've asked questions about the alleged controls that they do. Most studies, they don't even mention controls. They don't even pretend that they did any sort of controls. And if you're doing an experiment without controls, that's not scientific, and you can't demonstrate causation. So, we have absolutely absurd responses from them. But I would like to read to you, there's some parts that are really horrific about the responses that I got from Health Canada especially, but I'd just like to read you some specific bits. I know you don't want to hear it all. So I filed 2 separate Freedom of Informations to Public Health Agency of Canada. The first, as stated above, where I'm saying that I focused on the purification piece. The second, specifically about the alleged UK variant. I've also filed to the Royal Canadian Police, the OPP, various police stations too, because they were enforcing this. So of course they don't have evidence. So in an initial response letter from Public Health Agency of Canada, and I give the woman's name and I give the file numbers for all these hundreds of FOIs. What they did initially was they gave me with a study by Jared Bullard et al. That was supported by Manitoba Health, CADM Provincial Laboratory, Public Health Agency of Canada, and the National Microbiology Laboratory, and some emails. So this is what they're giving me when I'm asking them for evidence that the alleged particles have even been found in somebody. They give me a study, one study, and these authors admitted right in the abstract, the opening of their study, they admitted, you remember the test PCR, they admitted right in the opening, RT-PCR detects RNA, not infectious virus. Anybody who knows anything about PCR knows, okay, I'll explain this to you. So what they did, they take swabs or what have you from people, right? And then they say that they did a test and it was tested positive for COVID. So none of those tests have been validated because you can't possibly validate a test for something without showing that the something exists. So this is how these tests work. So what they do is they take, say, the lung fluid or the snot.
I'll save you. I understand what a PCR test is.
Okay, you do know about PCR. So they only work with the so-called genetic material. So even if there was a virus, they would have to destroy it and extract out the genetic material first. And remember, they've never purified a particle. So what they do is they take all the genetic material from either the lung fluid or the snot, or in some studies, it's even more ridiculous. So they go to a cell culture, which I can talk about later. So they haven't demonstrated that there's a virus. They take all of the so-called genetic material from a complex brew that would have cells from the person that they took the fluid from, bacteria, fungi, whatever happens to be in there, stuff that they've breathed in. It can be coming from many different sources. Okay, so they do something, they add an enzyme that will break down any cells, and if a virus actually existed, it would break it down. They pull all that stuff out. So now you've pulled it out from a brew of stuff. You haven't demonstrated that there's any virus, and now you've got all this material that supposedly has all these sequences. And then they run a test. Now, if you know about PCR, the best under the most rigorous, careful conditions, the best thing PCR can do is give indirect evidence of the sequence that they're targeting. They want to see if they get the green fluorescence. They run the cycles, and then they want to see, do they get that fluorescence, which is taken as it's indirect evidence that the target sequence is present. The target sequence...
Do you believe that any viruses exist?
I can say with 100% confidence